Now, stimulus season is still in full effect, and I'm bringing to you one of the latest stimulus check proposals brought to the table by billionaire Mark Cuban. Now, maybe you've already heard of this proposal, and if so, I still think that this video is going to be interesting because I decided to break this proposal down and look at what could work and the potential issues with it, and I go down a couple small rabbit holes along the way, as I normally do. So I know that Mark isn't a legislator and this isn't set to be voted on anytime soon, but I think it's important to bring up all the interesting ideas out there and break them down because really no one knows what the perfect solution is. Whether you like Mark or not, I'm happy that we have all sorts of people thinking about these issues and just putting their ideas out there. That's what I enjoy. So let's get right into it, starting with just the basic details of the proposal before I go ahead and break it down after that. Mark's idea is a $1,000 payment every 2 weeks for every American household. And then this would last for 2 months. So in 2 months, there's 8.69 weeks. So that would come out to $4,345 in total stimulus payments per American household. I rounded that down to $4,000 for the title because that's reverse clickbait. The key difference with this plan compared to all the other stimulus plans we've seen so far is you must spend that $1,000 payment you receive every 2 weeks within 10 days of receiving it. Otherwise, you lose it. It is a true use it or lose it scenario. Now, this is the part where I found it the most interesting, and I'll explore this later on in the video in more detail. Now I'd like to point out that Mark's proposal is just an idea. It doesn't have language for what specific exceptions would be made for any scenarios, and it isn't written in an insanely specific language like most bills are. So there are, certain points that are up for interpretation. The first one being, I'm assuming by American households, Mark is referring to the number of tax households there are in the US, which is basically the taxpayer and any individuals who are claimed as dependents under that taxpayer on one federal income tax return. Of which tax households, there are about 128 million of these in the US. So for total cost, if we take 128 million times 4,345, that comes out to just about $556 billion for this program. So for 2 months of funding, $556 billion. If we go off the same number of recipients that received the stimulus in the first round for that $1,200 check, that increases the number of total recipients to about 150 million people, in which the total cost would be about $651 billion. Now this is quite the coincidence because this is very similar to the total funding for the Small Business Paycheck Protection and EIDL grant programs. These programs received right around $666 billion in total funding as of the recording of this video. So this brings me to a point that Mark made. He stated that the Paycheck Protection Program didn't work. And that's why he brought up this proposal, because he thinks this will ultimately save businesses as well as make the lives of individuals a little bit easier. To that, I'd have to say, I both agree and disagree with that sentiment that it didn't work. First off, I agree that the program is overcomplicated, hard to navigate, just overly confusing all around. I mean, I posted a 20-minute video today explaining how loan forgiveness will work for small businesses on this program, which you definitely should watch if you own a small business and got a PPP loan, because it's a lot more complicated than you think. However, what I'm saying is you shouldn't have to watch a 20-minute video on how it works. It shouldn't be an 11-page forgiveness application like it is. It should be simple enough that you understand it in a minute or two. It should just be like one sheet, easy enough. So I agree with that. Secondly, I agree that the program was/is broken and biased. First, we saw way too many large companies just swallowing up all the funding in the first round. Then we realized that super small businesses like sole props, independent contractors were having a hard time applying. Banks just weren't even looking at their applications. And then there was very little support for minority groups. So there was definitely issues there. And finally, funding took forever. I mean, I applied for my PPP loan on the very first day of funding with a banker that I had a personal relationship with, and I didn't receive funding for 5 weeks. 5 weeks is long enough for most businesses to go out of business if they have no funding coming in through the door. So I can't imagine if I was completely closed up what I would have done for those 5 weeks. And there's still plenty of people who have not received funding and applied much more than 5 weeks ago. So yes, there's definitely some issues with this program. However, we really don't know the effects of it yet. So to say that it didn't work or it's broken altogether, most businesses receive funding within the last couple weeks, and many businesses haven't even opened their doors yet, so you really can't say whether it has worked or not. I mean, saying it failed altogether is just a bit dramatic. Maybe it's just trying to make a point there. We really don't know the full effects and won't for months to come, maybe even like a year down the road. I'm sure there's going to be research studies done on it that go over exactly how it worked, or at least make a good estimate of how it worked. So as far as I can tell, this program, the Paycheck Protection Program, is getting people back to work, but it's kind of using what I'm going to call inefficient dollars. So I define inefficient dollars as money spent for the sake of spending that isn't producing as much as it should for what is being spent. Now, maybe there's already a word for this in business, but it's kind of like the business equivalent of conspicuous consumption. So now we have all these businesses who receive funding, have their staff back at full hours so they can get loan forgiveness, but it's inefficient because revenues are still way down. So they're having lower revenues, but they're keeping expenses up high in order to get forgiveness. It's just the inefficiency of it. That's the inefficient dollar, inefficient funding that I was talking about. That's just the part that bugs me. So Mark cited that his plan would be an example of trickle up economics, and I tend to agree with that. Here's a quick sidebar, because I love going down little learning rabbit holes when I find one that I can go down. Trickle up economics theory was founded by John Maynard Keynes, who believed economic growth is enhanced when the government lowers taxes on the middle class and increases government spending. Basically saying that the key to economic growth is on the demand side, giving people money to spend, they'll spend it, everything else will straighten itself out automatically just by the way of demand and money flowing through individuals to businesses to governments and so on. So here's where I'm at, both as a business owner who received a PPP loan and from looking at all of these programs. So I received a $50,000 paycheck protection loan for my business. However, demand is still down for my businesses like it is for many businesses. And I own a service business, and the number one competitor to service businesses is people simply doing it themselves. If people have extra cash, they'll hire a service. If not, they'll do it themselves generally. This is for most service businesses. I have this loan that supports a big payroll, but demand is still down like 30 or 40%. So my choices are either one, I pay people to sit around or do extra stuff, and then I pay taxes on the extra amount because these expenses that I spend it on are not tax deductible, or two, I don't use all of the loan and waste part of the forgivable amount. Neither is a great choice in my opinion. So all of this, including the fact that I had to spend time preparing documents, worrying about if I'll get the loan at all, following up a million times with my banker, applying at other banks because I wasn't sure if it was going to go through, and I still need to work to get forgiveness after the 8-week period. All of this time I could have spent working and actually producing something. This brings me back to the inefficient dollars. So at this point, looking at the options, I would have personally rather people get additional stimulus payments and then subsequently my business get an extra $50,000 worth of jobs booked. Then I can keep my guys busy, be as efficient as normally, and then retain my normal 20 or so % profit that my business normally would attain under normal operating conditions, instead of going through this whole loan process and banking on government programs to keep the business propped up. it's just craziness. So in summary, I agree that demand is a major key to recovery. And then the next part I want to talk about is the spending time frame. Telling people to spend money within a time frame, I think, is a good idea. However, how that will be managed and monitored is a whole other story. I assume in order to monitor spending, we would need some kind of debit card system similar to the ABC stimulus proposal we saw. So even then, there's so many ways around spending money, like so many ways to pull cash out so they wouldn't have to spend the money right now. I mean, that's kind of besides the point because I think most people would still spend it, but there's a lot of loopholes here. And then we have the major issue of the fraud that would undoubtedly occur with all these debit cards or all these payments that need to be spent. An entirely new system would need to be built to manage this, and that alone would probably take two or more months. And then how do we even know the right people are receiving cards or the right people are spending the money on cards? So I hate to be a negative Nancy, but I just want to point out all the issues and all the good things that I see so I can be unbiased about it, present an unbiased opinion. So maybe there's a way around these issues, or the issue is small enough that the potential benefit outweighs any potential consequences with these issues. Either way, I like the idea of mandatory spending, at least in theory. Getting people to spend the money now would be awesome, both for the velocity of money and the GDP, which are both huge factors in a healthy economy. And right now, part of the problem is people are holding on to their money, holding on to their cash because they're unsure of what will happen next. So they have this little nest egg. The discretionary spending is way lower, which hurts GDP, which hurts the businesses, which is going to make everything last a little bit longer. So I think forcing the spending could potentially really help that out. So what are your guys' thoughts on this proposal? I know I gave out a ton of information here and a lot of perspective, but I'd be interested to see in the comments if you guys have any ideas, what your thoughts are. That's really about all I have for now. Until next time, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.